is Tom, and I'm a comedian. I got my 28-year coin. I'm really excited about that. I haven't always been a comedian. When I was young, I had great promise of being I was on track to be a manufacturing entrepreneur. When I was born, my dad said that I was a pooping machine. And I had the three things you needed to be a successful entrepreneur at that age. I had no startup costs, I had no inventory costs, and I had no bowel control. It was perfect. And this was a really good gig for a good long time. All I had to do was sit at home and take in raw materials and produce. My parents took care of everything else. And it was really nice. But about 2 years into this venture, they decided they wanted to change the method of distribution. Wasn't happy about that. Next thing you know, we're flushing product right down the toilet. I had a typical childhood, really, after that hopeful beginning. I was no genius, I'll tell you that right now. I was no Wolfgang Amadeus Schobach composing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star at age 3. Mostly because I didn't have the right equipment. I mean, I needed something good. You ever try to compose anything complex on one of these things? It is impossible. It's half an octave. I needed a real instrument. Something like this. Now, I really could have done something with this. Of course, actually, I probably couldn't have done that either because I had a really lousy drummer. So I went on to have kind of a normal childhood. When I got to be about age 10, my parents were starting to think that maybe I was a gifted child. So they decided to take me out and have my brain mapped, which I thought was kind of cool. And this is what it turned out to be. Not great. Typical boy. So I had a reasonably normal childhood. When I graduated from high school, I decided I was going to go on to college. I went to Bowling Green, as Deb mentioned. And my first year in college was amazing. I was doing really good. I was studying hard. I was getting good grades. And I was really excited to go back for my second year. Somewhere in the middle of my first and second year of college, my focus got thrown off. I have no idea what it was, but I just couldn't concentrate. And so I went back to school the next year, my sophomore year. I was not quite where I had been my first year. Now, I'm sure there were things that I could have done that would have made me a better student. Although I couldn't tell you to this day what those would be, but I'm sure there are one or two things that I could have done differently that second year of college. Some things you just don't do. But I graduated from Bowling Green, and my first job out of college was with a company right here in town that some of you may be familiar with. It was a terrific company. Back in the early 80s, when I started with Dana Corporation, they were one of the companies to work for in Toledo. They were a Fortune 500 company, and the thing I liked about Dana the most was they had this really cool motto. And I loved that. I loved working for a company that felt this way about their people. And I really thought, once I started at Dana, that I was going to spend the rest of my professional career at Dana Corporation. I thought I'd be going to work in a suit every day, wingtip shoes. I thought I'd be flying on a corporate jet. They'd give me a key to the men's room. Of course, the men's room was from the 18th century, but I'd still get a key to the men's room. And I thought that after 30 years, I would be rewarded by a grateful company for 30 years of dedicated service. Not exactly what Dana had. Remember that motto I told you about that I thought was so cool? After 2 years, they changed it just a little bit to more accurately reflect their feelings about me. And I was fired. So I messed around for a couple years trying to figure out what it was that I wanted to do for a living. And eventually I got hired by a physician's practice right here in Toledo. What a great gig this was. It was working with smart people. It was in a clean environment. I really enjoyed it. But it was about this time that the other part of my life kind of fell off the wheels, and I was enticed by the siren song of stand-up comedy. I wanted to be a stand-up comedian. So I started writing material, I started memorizing material, and I practiced it, and I decided one day I would go to a local open mic at a local comedy club. There used to be a comedy club on the Ramada Inn on Reynolds Road, not too far from South. So I went out there one Tuesday night, invited 20 of my friends to come along, and I got up and delivered 10 minutes of the absolute worst stand-up comedy ever heard in the city of Toledo. Or in the nation. And, okay, yeah, in the world. It was the worst. Look, I was bad. But it was really interesting because I got hooked. As anybody's ever gotten up and spoken in front of a group, there's a rush that comes from that. And I was hooked immediately. It was as if someone had taken a needle and was mainlining poorly written material, weak premises, bad transitions, and forced laughter into my veins. And I had to have more of it. So suddenly I started doing comedy. And I did that for about 6 or 7 years. I did it 5 nights a week, everywhere I could. And eventually I started traveling out on the road. I performed in Savannah, Georgia at the Comedy House. I used to work all the time in a place in Dayton, Ohio called Wiley's Comedy Club. And of course I worked right here in Toledo at the Toledo Comedy Club, which is now Connections. And it was very exciting. It was a really cool way to kind of make a living. But it was strange because I didn't feel like I was doing anything noble. I was telling jokes to drunks in bars. You know? I felt kind of funny about that, but I was doing pretty well. I traveled all over the eastern part of the United States, and I did a little on the West Coast. And it was really fun, but like I say, I felt like something was not quite there. My sister, who was a social worker down in Roanoke, Virginia, she had come up to visit one day, and one weekend I was doing a show at the Comedy Club, and she came out to watch, and she said, "Oh, we were really good, we really enjoyed it." And I told her about my concerns about not doing noble enough work, and she said, "Don't negate the importance of humor." I said, "But Ann, there are people out there risking their lives every day. They're saving people. They're doing really great things. I wasn't doing that. There were people who were defending our country in a foreign land in wars. I wasn't cut out for that. In fact, if I were in the service, there aren't enough of these in the entire nation to take care of me the minute I find myself in this situation." And she said, "Don't negate the power of comedy. It's really important." She said, "When people go to a comedy club, maybe they've had a lot of food, and they go there and they laugh for an hour and a half. And you're giving them something to rejuvenate them. They forget about their lives for a while. And they carry that energy with them, sometimes for a couple hours, maybe a day after they leave that club." So she said, "You're really doing important work." Suddenly I looked at stand-up comedy in a different way. It suddenly was not a bottomless pit of squandered personal potential, human potential, like I always thought that it was. And you gotta remember, this was my brain, okay? It had evolved a little bit from my childhood. The only adjustment I made with this was it evolved a little bit more when I started doing stand-up. But I'll tell you, I was never going to be one of these guys. It just wasn't. I was able to make an impact with humor, kind of like that. This idea that my sister put in my head about doing great things with stand-up comedy, she said that idea was brought home to me in a much more realistic way about 20 years later when my dad got sick. Let me introduce you to my dad. He was born in 1918, and he was an amazing guy. He was a Depression kid. So a lot of the stuff that he dealt with was from growing up in the Depression. He was a part of this generation. When World War II started, he went out and he enlisted in the Navy, and he helped save the world from Adolf Hitler. He was also a very funny guy. He had a great sense of humor. A little silly, but he was my hero. He still is. He was also a construction worker all his professional life. So he was around asbestos and a lot of toxic substances, and he was a smoker for 40 years. And as he got older and he started struggling with the aging process, he pretty much encountered every possible medical challenge that an older person could have. And it was kind of rough. Those hammer toes were tough. Then he'd show them to us. That was worse. No! So one day I had to take him to see his lung doctor. They wanted to do some tests on him. They determined that he wasn't getting enough oxygen in his blood, so they decided to put him on oxygen 24/7. His lung doctor was, you might know Dr. Vinny Boombox. And so Dr. Boombox put him on oxygen 24/7. And of course, my dad was a stubborn guy. He didn't want to do it. It took a long time for him to finally embrace the fact that he needed to be on oxygen all the time. So he was doing it. He was getting along pretty well. All of oxygen around with him everywhere he went. And then 2 years after this diagnosis, he broke his hip. They were coming out of a restaurant, and he fell down, broke his hip, and it was not a great thing for him, obviously. I went to see him that night at the hospital, and he walked into the room, and he was lying in his bed, and he didn't have any oxygen. There was oxygen in the room, an oxygen service in the room, but he wasn't hooked up to it. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. I need to let the nurse know when she comes in that he needs to be on oxygen. So eventually the nurse came in and she kind of grumbled at me. Nurse Ratchet. And I tried to be as nice as I could because I didn't want to tick off any healthcare worker working with my dad. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, if I make them mad, they're going to maybe not be as nice to my dad when I'm not around, when someone's not around to keep an eye on him. Now, maybe this is me just being paranoid, but I didn't want to do that. So when she came in, I said to her, oh, by the way, I just want to let you know, my dad needs to be on oxygen 24/7. And she said in this tone, well, sir, it's not in his chart. I said, oh, well, I understand that, but I said, I'm his son, and I understand he's for 2 years, he's needed to be on oxygen 24/7, so if we could make that happen, that would be great. Well, sir, it is not in his chart. You only say that to me twice. We had words in the room, and then we went out in the hall and had a few more words. Now, let me just ask, who would have approached this in a different way? Say yes. What would be one way that you might approach this subject? Someone saying, hey, my dad needs to be on oxygen. How would you diffuse that situation? Anyway.
Let me research that. Yeah. Call the doctor.
Yeah, call the doctor. Even maybe a little humor. Oh, those darn doctors. Let me give them a call and see what's going on. I would not have been nearly as bristled as I was when that happened. Here's the problem with that. That damage can be far-reaching. Suddenly, I didn't trust her anymore. I didn't trust the other healthcare workers at that hospital. I didn't really trust her doctor. And I sure as heck didn't trust the hospital lady of perpetual screw-ups. I was not. I think it also had an effect on my dad. Now, I don't know for sure because my dad went in with a raging UTI. And you know what those things are like when elderly people get that? They are crazy. My dad was loopy. And for all I knew, when we were having this exchange, he could have been reliving his World War II days in Hawaii. Or more than likely, he was admiring the passenger cruise ship that was parked right outside his hospital window, even though we were miles from the nearest lake, stream, river, or other body of water. It just further soured a rather unpleasant situation. Now, I get it. Healthcare workers are overworked. A lot of times they're underpaid. The staffs have been cut. It's a tough job. I worked in the medical field for 8 years. I know what it's like to deal with some of these older people who are just crazy. They're just nuts. I know it's tough, and I don't care. That's my dad. He changed my diapers. He took me canoeing when I was 12 years old. He gored his hand every Christmas Eve, putting toys together for his entire family. He made the best grilled chicken in the world. Not this guy. This guy. He came to every one of my high school wrestling matches, even if he had to drive drive 2-3 hours for it. He supported my first independent film when I made it, and a whole bunch of other crazy schemes I've cooked up in my entire life. Sometimes not as much as I would have liked, but he's always been there to support me. He's my hero. You're supposed to take care of him. And when I come to his defense because he can't, I don't want attitude from you. Now, it wasn't just this nurse, and I'll tell you, in defense of other people in this business, there were a lot of wonderful people who helped take care of my dad. But there were a lot of people who didn't do such a good job. Nurses, technicians, doctors, the people who worked at the nursing home where he spent the last days of his life, hospice people. Yeah, hospice people. I realized how important humor is in dealing with people like me. Just a real quick story. My brother and I used to go to see him in the nursing home. And we were rather vocal about what we didn't like. And we found out later from his aide that when we came to the nursing home, the word would go through that nursing home like fire. The Hofbauer boys are here. We should have been riding in on horses with 6 of them. Why is it so important to have humor? Why is it so important to have laughter in doing that job, the important job of healthcare, especially for the elderly population? Well, number one, laughter increases oxygen to the heart and the brain. It helps people connect more effectively with one another. Had that nurse connected more with me in a humorous vein, we never would have had that battle. And I would have told you about it because it wouldn't have happened. It reduces pain. Laughter can help people in their job performance. And if you're happy, you'll be better at your job. Another thing is to possibly be mad at someone when you're laughing. Have you ever tried that? Try to be really pissed off at someone who's laughing with you. You can't do it. It's impossible. There's a physician from the University of Maryland. His name is Michael Miller. And he was speaking to the American College of Cardiology. He had done a ton of research on laughter and humor in regards to medicine, especially with cardiac patients. And he determined that laughter offsets the impact of mental stress. That's huge. That's a big thing. Laughter has been known to increase endorphins. Not the endorphins, not Ralph and Cynthia endorphins. The lovely couple down the street who come to the hospital once a year for their annual colonoscopy. Not them. Endorphins. Now, I couldn't find a picture of endorphins. This is the closest I could get. But endorphins are those amino acid things that give people a sense of well-being and can temporarily relieve pain. Humor, laughter can be relaxing. Now, as a stand-up comic, I don't want to see this kind of thing like a comedy club, making people laugh, but it's a very relaxing thing. It can strengthen your immune system. It can reduce chronic pain. Laughter can increase creativity and help in problem solving. And again, it's impossible to be mad at someone when you're laughing. There's a great book called Blink, written by Malcolm Gladwell. How many have read this book? It's a terrific book. If you haven't read it, it's a breeze to read. You can read it in 3 trips to the bathroom, I promise. I'm in there a long time. Remember, I was doing it early in my life. He said that he does a whole chapter about laughter. And he says that laughter is so important because of financial reasons. He interviewed a couple who had a difficulty with a physician. And they had clearly a case where they could have sued this physician. And they did. And Gladwell talked to him. He said, "Why didn't you sue this guy?" And they said, "Well, we really like him." People don't want to sue someone they really like. That doesn't mean you can be a doctor and be a crappy doctor and just be nice and get away with it. But people don't want to sue someone they like. So it has financial implications. That's a big one. Now here's the thing. You don't all have to be a comedian to be funny, to use laughter and humor in your daily life. I heard on pretty good authority that Attila the Hun was a funny guy. This guy was a funny guy. Do you remember in the last presidential administration when when this guy went to wherever it was, overseas, and he got that shoe thrown at him, remember that? George Bush was a funny guy. This guy is not only brilliant, but he's also very funny. And he makes that connection. I think that really smart people are really funny people. How do you do it? How do you incorporate humor if you're not a comedian? How do you bring it into your daily life? I'm going to explain this with a little story. I moved to LA in 1993. And I had moved out there with my girlfriend at the time. And we had been together for a year. We lived in LA together for 2 years before our relationship fell apart. And it was her fault. And I had forgotten how to date. Now, in LA, there's a really cool thing. They have in some other cities. I think they have it in New York. But there's a thing called the Learning Annex. And you can go there, you can pay 25 or 30 bucks. And in LA, you can learn how to be a script reader for the studios. Or you can learn how to be a personal assistant to a celebrity. They had a class in their catalog, Learn to Flirt. I thought, what the heck, 25 bucks, I'll do it. You get what you pay for sometimes, that's what I'm saying. So, but this class was being taught by the woman who wrote this book. And so I drove out to Santa Monica and found the Lowe's Hotel where this was going to be held, and went into the ballroom, and there were a lot of people in the ballroom, probably 20 to 30 people in the ballroom. And I walked in there and I looked around and I thought to myself, what a bunch of losers. The second thing I thought was, oh my God, I'm the loser too! But she had a really interesting approach to flirting. She said you have to practice flirting all the time. You flirt with everyone. Even if you're not interested in dating that person, getting to know that person, you flirt with everyone. So when the time comes, when it's important to flirt, you don't get all nervous and tongue-tied. The same thing goes with humor. You have to practice humor. Practice it all the time. My friends will tell you I'm so annoying because I practice humor, flirt with the cashier at the grocery store. I flirt with the pizza delivery guy. Not flirt, but I practice humor. I'll even practice humor with this guy. I'm not flirting with this guy, but I will practice humor with this guy. Then, when the time comes, you can be spontaneous and humorous. You don't have to kind of go through a Rolodex in your head of what's funny. Here's another little thing. This would have worked great that day in my dad's hospital room with that nurse. Smile more often. Smiling is a great way to make a connection with someone. It doesn't cost anything. You don't have to have a clever line. You can just smile. The flirty woman talks about this too. She says you got to do this in a dating situation. You have to do this with 90 new people a week. Do it with everybody. Be humorous. Laugh, smile with everybody that you meet. And it will become second nature to you after a while. Spend time with happy people. Well, not these happy people. These are my happy people. Find your own happy people. But seek out those who have a lightness of spirit and a sense of humor. And who like to laugh. You can use funny stories or cartoons. And if you're presenting and you want to inject some humor into that, you can use funny stories or cartoons. As long as they're appropriate for the audience. I love this next one. This was on the Ellen Show. everyone done salute. And then he said, if you want, we can release some doves at the graveside. So naturally, we said, well, you know, if you take those guys with the guns, make sure they're locked and loaded, you release those doves, we got a hot meal at the reception. We laughed for 2 hours setting up that funeral. And the funeral director, when we left, he said, I have never had so much fun as I had to do that. We cried a lot. And we laughed a lot. Now, some people may say this is offensive or disrespectful, but you gotta remember, this was my dad. He would have loved it too. Another way to bring laughter into your life is to go out and see funny things, go to funny movies, go to live theater. This is actually my improv troupe. Go see comedians live in a comedy club. It infuses you with oxygen. Why not have the things that you quote during the day just as part of regular conversation be lines that are written by the best writers in television? I quote Seinfeld more than you can possibly imagine. And everybody knows Seinfeld, whether you like it or not, everybody knows it. And people who are fans of Seinfeld know that Seinfeld has an application for every situation in life. But if you like something else, quote that. There's nothing wrong with it. People from Seinfeld are not going to come after you and sue you for using their lines. Have a laugh at your own expense. Don't take yourself so seriously. Have fun. That's my normal look. Here's me with a mullet. This is me with herpes. And this is me with my big face. So, learn to laugh at yourself. I was in Philadelphia several years ago. I was doing a class on communication, presentation training for Sunoco. And they put me up at the Sheraton Hotel, right at the airport. Now, I'm a 3 to 4 mile a day runner, but I couldn't run. There was nowhere I could run because it's like parking lot, runway. And so I thought, well, I'll just go down to the health center in the hotel there, and I'll run on the treadmill. I'm a runner. Come on, how difficult can it be? I've never run on a treadmill before. So I go down there. There's like 4 or 5 people lined up. And there's this young, strapping guy running on the treadmill, looking like an ad from a sporting goods catalog. So I go in there and I get on my treadmill, I take my iPod, I put it on the stand of the treadmill, and I plug in my earbuds, and I turn that thing on and I start running. The next thing you know, I hit my arm on the cord connecting my iPod to my earbuds. The iPod pops off of the treadmill, hits the running surface of the treadmill, shoots off the head with me in hot pursuit, right on the next. Well, the guy next to me chuckles a little bit. I dust myself off, I get back on, I put my iPod back on it, plug it in, I start to run again. And once again, I hit it, that thing goes down, shoots off the back, I follow it. Now I'm getting pissed. I think, okay, I'm going to do one more time. So this time I get on the treadmill and I'm holding the iPod in my hand. And I'm running, and again, I knock that thing down, it hits the deck, I fall to all fours, and both of us shoot off the deck. This guy starts laughing. And I wanted to say, hey, this is hard! But he wasn't having any problem with it. And I thought, you know what? Why would I yell at this guy because he's laughing at me? I'm the idiot! So I took a moment and I thought, approach this differently. And I looked at him and I said, wait, I don't think this is for me. And he said, nah, I don't think so either. I turned that treadmill off and I went back to my room. And I haven't been on a treadmill since, but I chose the way that I responded in that situation. I had just enough time to go, how do I want to do this? Rather than following my instincts, which were to be angry at this poor guy who had nothing to do with it. He didn't force me on anything. And I took a moment and I did respond in a better way. And actually, I left there feeling kind of good, as opposed to had I gotten mad at this guy, I would have been feeling We can choose the way we respond. And I'm telling you, in the medical industry, I know it's tough. There are people who are sometimes way too serious. And there's nothing wrong with a little humor, a little levity. Even though you're dealing with life-threatening situations sometimes. Or in this case, you have people who are like my dad, nearing the end of their life and they're having struggles. But I'll tell you what, my dad loved it when the healthcare workers who interacted with him would come in and have a joke or have a laugh with him. He loved that. You can change how you're going to react. You can choose how you're going to react. All you have to do is change the way you think. Here's a great quote from Jerry Greenfield, who's one of the founders of Ben & Jerry. This company, I've done some research on this company, they have a ball at this company. It's a lot of fun. People love working there because it's fun, because they laugh. This is the philosophy by which they run a very successful business. I heard passion mentioned earlier. Passion is so important. You add some passion to this, your life is going to get better, your work is going to get better. I love this quote. How many wasted days do you want to have? Any questions or comments?